Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is Guy McPherson here again with Neil Shepard. We're pursuing a conversation about deep time again, specifically because there was an interesting series of political circumstances in this country over the course of the last week or so. We wanted to talk a little bit about the politics of the divided states of America. And so I think we'll start there with a little bit of popcorn action, as it's sometimes called. Neil will throw something at me and I'll briefly respond. So, Neil, thanks for joining me again and fire away.
Good. Everyone should get their microwave popcorn ready because this is going to be political popcorn reflecting on deep time, climate change, and our energy, social, and cultural predicaments. So, first popcorn question: surprised or unsurprised at the results of the election last week?
Not terribly surprised. I was a little surprised that it was a complete sweep, that Trump won the presidency. It looks like he's going to carry both houses, the House and the Senate. And of course, he already had control, or the Supreme Court had control over him, one or the other. But the shift to the right, the exceptional far right during my lifetime, and Neil, during your lifetime, has been absolutely astonishing and not a lot of fun, if I do say so myself, even though, we're Caucasian males, so we're in a position to be about as good as it gets in this world. And still, I'm a little nervous about what's to come.
Any reasonable person should be, any sane, reasonable person. Question two: in the lead up to this election, as you looked at the track record of Biden and the projected intentions of Kamala Harris and Walz, was there anything dramatic that would have or could have made a significant dent in climate change in the next 4 years, which is the length of a U.S. administration?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a little hard to tell, but it's trading in one warmonger for another warmonger, and it seems that that's the most important thing in terms of action and thoughts for the president that wasn't Kamala Harris and her running mate. Nobody ever talks about ending military adventures. Nobody ever talks about bringing peace to various parts of the world. So obviously that's a little disappointing, but not terribly surprising if you've been paying attention for the last, 64 years that I've been on the planet.
So it's mainly war. It's not an abiding feeling that the climate would have been saved by Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and the climate is gonna be further stomped into the ground by Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I don't see any way around it. I don't see any serious politician during my lifetime who has taken a serious look and come up with any actions that might make sense with respect to climate change. We're in a mess. I mean, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was designed to fail when it was created during the Ronald Reagan administration, even they admit that we're in the midst of the most abrupt change in planetary history. So when we talk about abrupt climate change, even abrupt geophysical events do not approach current rates of human-driven change. That's straight from the IPCC's global warming of 1.5 degrees on October 8th, 2018. And then in the IPCC Special Report on the Ocean and Cryosphere and a Changing Climate, the IPCC concluded that we're in the midst of irreversible climate change because of an overheated ocean. So it's behind us. Abrupt, irreversible climate change is what we're going to have to live with for those of us who are still living over the course of the next few to many years. And I don't see any way around that, but I don't see any politician taking any of it seriously.
So in our view, then, the Inflation Reduction Act and all its subsidies for EVs and for renewables, a host of other sort of laundry list of other things, this is okay, but in your view, not transformative, even if it continued, even if Kamala Harris were to double that.
Right. Coming from politicians, I think it was great. I think the Inflation Reduction Act was a great idea that I'm astonished they got through and passed. But would it have saved us? No. We're beyond that. We're in the midst of abrupt, irreversible climate change. That's just the way it is. I'm not happy about it. But if the IPCC claims that we're in the midst of abrupt, irreversible climate change, then I can't see any way around it. And by the way, they made this announcement more than 5 years ago. It's the thing I hear least about from the corporate media. Do you ever hear CBS News or CNN or anybody else on their news show saying, hey, the planet is amid abrupt, irreversible climate change? That sounds like it's bad news. Maybe we should have a
Well,
conversation about that.
they'll never use either a word abrupt or especially not irreversible. It is all reversible, Guy. You
Of
just have
course.
to take your gas stove and put it to the curb, put in an induction stove, change all of your appliances to electric, get that EV, spend 45 instead of $35,000 on an EV, probably file a bunch of paperwork to try and get whatever the subsidies are paid back to you. You need an accountant for that. And let's see, put solar on your roof, even if your roof is, as most American roofs are, not at all suited, not even facing in the solar direction. Cut down any trees, of course, next to your home, which you should do anyway for fire control if you're in the rural area, thus increasing the amount of sun hitting your house in this heating environment. And put solar on your roof. There's a full laundry list of what you should be doing, including not using plastic straws, somehow go to today's supermarket and not come home with plastic. I don't know. I mean, I look at the ever more plastic is proliferating. But let's assume that we did all those things. That's going to keep us below 2 degrees, isn't it?
We're already beyond 2 degrees. Governments of the world concluded that we were beyond 2 degrees in October of last year. October of last year. So 13 months ago, governments of the world said, well, we're already beyond two. You know, it didn't make the news.
It doesn't. The news is still touting 1.5. We're going to hold it to 1.5. But even if we did, Guy, just looking, let's just magically say that it's only at 1.5 now. What would any experienced climatological scientist of any of the disciplines that go into that category, what do most of them make of just the already quite visible and measurable rates of change? Are they going to reverse if we hold it to 1.5 degrees?
Are you kidding? What's the most important thing? The economy. That's what this recent election was all about. That's what it's always all about, is who's going to pump up the economy. And as soon as Trump was elected, the Dow Jones shot up, what, 1,500 points in 15 minutes or something like that? It was unbelievable. And it continues because it doesn't really matter if we have a convicted felon, if we have a rapist and a warmonger and like the worst human being you would never want your daughter to go out with. If he's running the show, well, I'm going to quote a line from Edward Abbey here, Southwestern American writer and public figure. If this situation is hopeless, there's nothing to worry about.
There you go.
That's where we are.
It's hard to believe. I agree with you. The things that the Biden administration did and that the Harris administration might have done were all good, but none of them were anywhere near going to reverse or get us to net zero or zero emissions or 100% renewables. These are goals which in previous and further discussions that we're going to have, when we drill down and really try and look at it, we will learn more about those kinds of goals and how difficult they are. They're good goals, but they are not reachable in the timeframes that people are proposing to supposedly avoid runaway climate change, abrupt climate change, or avoid 2 degrees, or whatever these magical thermostat settings that they think they're going to maintain on the planet. And I'm just a layperson, Guy. I come to this having known you for some time, but I do my own independent research, as I think you can see and others who watching this can see. I'm trying to find the hole in the theory, and I haven't found it yet.
Right.
I'm trying
Right.
to find the counter trend. And what I see is, in fact, the papers that come out, it's like they discover that abrupt heating in the Arctic and Antarctic now, they think, began as early as 1900 in response to just the carbon we had emitted by then. They
Right.
keep finding out what, faster and faster? Guy, is that now what we're finding out?
Yes, yes. The motto of this satellite living arrangements, of course, is must go faster. And so no matter what else we do in this society, there's this overwhelming ambition to just go faster at everything we do. And I suppose that includes extinction, right? So all species are headed ultimately for extinction, as professor and science educator Carl Sagan wrote. By far, most of the species of life that have ever existed are now extinct. Extinction is the rule, survival is the exception. So
Mm,
that's clearly where we're headed, but I'm not in a big hurry. I don't want to get there fastest.
no. And I don't want to be insulted and watch my fellow humans being insulted and demeaned at a higher rate than could otherwise be achieved. And I think this political outcome, to me, is just more insulting in every way to be proceeding down the inevitable, irreversible slope of climate change with this man and this government instead of a different one. It just adds injury and insult to the injuries and insults that are already inevitable. What's your thought?
I've been saying since I was first able to vote that the current president is the worst president of my lifetime. And and that holds up really well. I didn't think somebody could be worse than Trump the first time, but I think a completely incoherent, incompetent person actually pulled that off.
Mm,
And now what I would love is for that completely incoherent, incompetent person to be in charge, would be in to be in the position of president of the United States. But instead, Biden has been overtaken, Harris has been overtaken by somebody who it's just unimaginable that any thinking populace would elect this person on purpose.
I think that's the last point we should close with, because I don't know that it's worth much more exhalation of CO2 on your and my part, but just the difficulty that I think we're both having in thinking through the population that just shifted significantly, as far as these voting statistics go, significantly in Trump direction in all of the constituencies that are normally thought of as tending democratic. Even
Right.
black and brown people, Asian people, Muslim people, who he personally and as a candidate did everything he could to demean those kinds of people, actually created harms against them on a grander scale than any prior president of any administration. And yet those constituents and young people and new voters all swung towards this man who is a known horror show as a political leader and who, by everything, has advertised that he's going to be more of a horror show this time around.
Oh, yes.
How do you process the votes of your fellow Americans here?
You know, it's pretty interesting because I've been hearing, as I have heard since 1980, that people are going to leave the country. Really? I know exactly two people who have actually left the country because we were uncomfortable with this country. And that was my partner, Pauline, and me. We left because this country is, we determined, not a decent place to live. So we left. And deaths in family brought us back, along with other horrible things. And ultimately, what I discovered was several things. Because of the aerosol masking effect, there's no escape because of the way we live in this world, not just on this continent or in this country, but in this world. There's no escape from abrupt, irreversible climate change. Is there any escape from the politics of this country? Well, I'm not sure there is. And so I think leaving probably was a mistake, although it was an educational one, at least. And now I hear and see all these people who say they're going to leave. I don't think it'll actually happen, at least not in large numbers. And if it does, I think those people will turn out to be very disappointed, as I was, because, well, there's a book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, and it's about Buddhism. And that's the same. Wherever you go, there you are. So if you move to some other country outside of this one, you're still going to find yourself,
I think
for
more to
better
the
and
point,
worse.
Guy, it would be one thing if this spasm of embracing cruelty, out and out cruelty, faux nativism, faux nationalism. I mean, actual nationalism means that you should be saying every American comes first. Faux nationalism is you say white Americans come first, all other Americans come second or should leave. So we have racist faux nationalism and nativism. Actual nativism in this country would mean that everyone who is not an indigenous person or descended from an indigenous person should leave. So, of course, we don't have actual nativism. What we have is this kooky nativism of white people, some white people saying we belong here and all others don't. It's just insane. Um,
Yes, it is. It
and
is
so
insane.
we have this
Hmm.
being embraced, though, in numerous countries that are supposed to be civilized in Europe. In Hungary, it is taken over. But these movements, as we've seen in this country, they don't have to actually take the reins of power or even be the majority in a legislature. France and Germany are both in the grip, their politics completely affected by the rise from just 3 or 4% to 14 or 24 or 34% of right-wing party. And it completely changes, even without having to be the majority or be the prime minister. It completely changes what's possible and what is even discussed as a way forward for these countries. So there is no escape as an expat. Which country do you think you're going to have a reasonable political life in?
There isn't one, I don't think.
Even smug Scandinavia, where we're all so politically correct and nice. Denmark and Sweden both are feeling and showing a different side in terms of their politics towards people who aren't white and blonde.
Right.
So is the Netherlands. And you could say, well, this is because they let in too many immigrants. What's causing the immigrants? All the wars, all the climate change, the drought, those conditions are not going to go away. We're going to be competing and scrambling for more resources. There's going to be more refugee creation. They're going to have to go somewhere.
More than 8 billion people on the planet is a prescription for disaster, no matter what political party you adhere to.
Right. So anyway, we should round this up. Just in case people were wondering, we thought we would address this very transient thing called politics. It's just more insulting on the way down.
Yes, I just want to mention one more political thing, a little unrelated. I graduated high school on the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, and I only have problems with two of the words in the phrase Indian Reservation. They're
Right.
indigenous, they're not Indian. What do you think? They're from India? And it's a reservation? Really? Are we? And we're still calling it that. This is a spot reserved for these other people. It's just a classic example of othering, and that's politics in this country, othering left and right.
Well, with that, we will move on.
Good idea.